Hi, I'm Jennifer Ferguson with Artistic Painting Studio, and I am going to show you a very simple finish to do with one of my Fauxy rollers. So today we're going to actually be working with the Chrysanthemum pattern, and we're just going to get started. So the first part of this is we are going to be rolling through a texture, okay? So I've got a product here. It's called Texture Medium. It's under my own brand called Artsyville Embellishments. And this stuff is basically what we call kind of like marshmallow cream. So I'm gonna let you guys see into the bucket, okay? So it's just basically white marshmallow cream in there. I'm just gonna scoop some out. And there are quite a few different ways to actually apply the material to your surface. And one of my favorites is always using a trowel. Well, we've got a couple different trowels that I like to use. So first I'm going to introduce you to my trowels, okay? So this one is a little Japanese trowel, and it's a number 165, so it's smaller and great for small projects. If you're really working on something smaller, we even have what's called the mini trowel. And this one is, not quite half the size, but it's definitely smaller, okay? So if you've got your smaller projects, this one is really great to work with, and then one up. And then if you don't have a trowel handy or you're not ready to invest in one, you can always use some kind of a spatula or scraper, and these will also be great to apply the material. So I'm going to position my camera down here so that you can see what I'm working on, okay? So I base coated the board a darker gray just so that you would be able to see the contrast and see the pattern. You do not have to have this color combination. You could go directly onto a prime surface, a white surface, you know, whatever works. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how to use both tools, and I'm just going to load the material onto the spatula, and then basically it's your thumb on the side with the product, the 4 fingers on the back, and basically it's kind of like spreading frosting on a cake. Just put that stuff on there, okay? And you just use a little bit of pressure as it's transferring to the surface, and then you can lighten up your pressure and move it around. So that is how the spatula is used, and now I'm going to go ahead and show you guys also how you can do this with a trowel. And okay, I have to change the angle of my application here. It'd be easier to do it from this direction. Let's make sure that you can see this. Okay, so I always have somewhere around a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch angle. That's the amount of distance that this edge is away from the surface. And then just using a little bit of pressure, you'll allow the trowel to just glide across the surface and apply the product to the surface, okay? And you can go in any direction, and don't worry, nothing has to be perfect, okay? You just want to try to get that material onto whatever surface it is you're working, okay? So if it happens to be a piece of furniture, a cabinet door, whatever, just whatever works. I've had some people that actually have brushed it on, and that'll create more texture in the product itself, but that's not saying that it's a bad thing. You'll just have more texture to work with. When you're putting it on, you want to keep it so that the thickness of the material is pretty thin, okay? So you don't want any more than maybe like 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch thick. And like I said, you don't have to worry about anything being perfect. If you have some trowel lines, some brush strokes, it's all going to work, okay? And then we're going to get to the fun part here. We're going to get to the roller, okay? So like I said, this is the Chrysanthemum pattern. And the first thing that I always check is to make sure that the roller is spinning freely, okay? So roll it and or spin it and just make sure that it's rolling freely, it's not getting caught. If by chance it is, then I would remove the handle, spray it with either like a cooking spray or some Vaseline and lubricate it so that when you put it back in, it's going to spin really well. Also, all your rollers come with their own handle, okay? So all the Fauxy rollers do come with a handle, so you don't have to order anything separate. And then all you have to do is just roll right through the material. And then I'm just positioning over so I can roll another pass of the pattern. And that really is it. So the texture medium that I'm working with stays wet long enough that you've got plenty of time to come back and to roll through it. Some materials dry a little faster than others, so you might want to test what other products you have laying around. And then you're going to want to let this completely dry. I'm going to say at least a couple of hours for this to completely dry. And then once it is dry, you will definitely need to, and let me make sure I can give you a close-up here, okay? Can you see that some of the edges of the pattern actually peek up? And the roller does that as it's rolling through the material. So that's basically what I'm normally coming back to sand down, okay? So let me grab one of my samples that's already done. And this one's completely dry, and I've already taken the time to go out and sand it. But what I do recommend is make sure you always put your mask on. And I will take normally 150 sandpaper. A lot of times we just wrap it around a sanding block so that when we're sanding, it's only taking off the high marks. It's not going to take off the rest of the pattern. And you can determine, depending on the finished outcome that you're looking for, you might sand it down smoother if it was going to be like the top of a table. If it's going to be like a drawer front, then you don't have to smooth it down as much. It basically depends on what you are creating on, okay? So I've already sanded this all down, so I still have left the texture of the pattern. And now I'm just going to show you one of just a simple finish on how to complete this, okay? And your creativity is completely open here. You guys can do anything you want at this point. I'm just showing you one of the ways that I have, that I actually do the finish. So I'm going to be working with, this is some DIY paint, okay, by Debbie's Design Diary. So it's a chalky style paint. And let me make sure I've got my lid off here, okay. And I've already stirred this up. So all I'm going to do is just paint on one complete layer of paint. And this particular brand of chalk paint does have a tendency to cover in one layer pretty well. And I'm planning on distressing it, so if it doesn't cover absolutely perfect, I'm not going to worry about it. But I know that when I'm doing this particular technique, I like to try to get away with one layer of paint if possible, because I think it's an easier technique to distress if there is only one layer of paint. And I'm just using what's called an artist wash brush, okay? So they're basically just a flat brush. Use whatever brush you like. I have a tendency to not like a lot of brush stroke, so this brush tends to lay things down pretty smooth. So once you have 100% coverage, then you'll have to allow this layer to completely dry, okay? To do anything next on most chalk paints, you have to allow full 100% dry before you can go to your next step. But you can see how we have not eliminated the pattern. It's still there, okay? So I'm going to put that one up here so it can dry. I'm also going to make sure that we have a clean area to work on. So let me cover up the wet paint there. Okay, so this one has been completely dried, and you can still see the pattern, but you can't see it as much now. So one of the techniques that I like to do is use a product called cheesecloth, okay? So this is a bolt of it, and it just pulls off in this size sheet, which is great. The bolts come with like 100 pieces on them, and then just fold it to where you have a pad to work with, and just grab a spray bottle of water, and I will spray the cheesecloth. Now the reason I like the cheesecloth is because it has a little texture to it, so that when I'm trying to do what's called a wet sand, that it will grab the pattern, okay? So you can continue to add water to the cheesecloth, and when I'm rubbing on it, and you can distress as much or as little as you want, it really is a personal preference, but you can see how I'm bringing the edges of the design back out by exposing the texture medium, okay, because it is a white medium. So it's going to bring the design back to life. Now, I'll do two ways. I'll just spray just the cheesecloth, and there's times I'll go ahead and spray the whole surface so it gets a little bit wet. And this, though, you can't control as much. So when I wet the whole surface, I will get back into the background area as well as being able to distress the roller pattern. So it depends on how much distressing you really want to do. If you're wanting to be very careful, only get the cheesecloth wet and then come in and distress. If you're looking to do a lot of distressing and you don't mind if some of the background is also removed, then you can wet the surface first, just like I showed you, okay? So you can see how the pattern's coming back to life. And we're gonna move on to my next sample here. Okay, so this one here, I've done some distressing, but this is also a great thing to show you guys. This is wet and this is dry. So chalk paints normally do change considerably from wet to dry. We want to bring that back alive, so I'm going to do just a simple wax technique. And I'm going to start with some clear wax. Oh, maybe. Okay, let's see if we can get the jar open. There we go. And when I'm doing the waxing, I like to put on a glove, just so I don't have the wax all over my hands. Oh, my glove's kind of shiny. I got glitter all over the place in here. And we're going to, again, just use a piece of cheesecloth and just grab some of the wax out of the jar. And I'm putting it onto a foam plate so that I can work it into the cheesecloth itself. And then you can go over to your surface and just in a buffing motion, you can buff on the wax. And with waxing, I really like to keep it thin because the wax dries from the top down. So you never want to put it on too heavy. Let me get just a little bit more here. So if you're looking to build the wax layer, then make sure you do it in thin, even coats, and apply a coat of wax like I've just done. See, and the whole pattern has come back to life once again. So you want to wax over everything, allow it to completely dry. You can do a light buffing and then come back and apply another coat of wax. If you're really wanting to get a little bit more of an older or distressed look, you could also put on a layer of dark wax. But this is the final look. It'll dry a little bit lighter because, like I said, even with the wax, it won't stay this dark. It will dry just a little bit lighter, but you'll have your contrast and your pattern will be back alive. So again, I just want to say thank you for joining me and learning how to use some of these rollers. So you can check us out at artisticpaintingstudio.com, where you will find lots of instructions, tons of rollers, supplies, and everything else. So thank you for joining me, and have a great day.